Level 1, the curious beginner. You're 10 years old, and the rod isn't yours, it's your grandfather's, a Penn Squidder reel bolted to a fiberglass rod that's older than your mother, and he hands it to you at the foot of a wooden pier that stretches 900 feet into the gray water off the coast. The line is 20-pound test, sun-faded to almost white. You don't know what test means yet. You just know the rod is heavier than it looks, and the reel makes a sound like a zipper when you turn the handle. Your grandfather ties on a simple two-hook bottom rig himself because your hands are too clumsy for the knot. He threads a piece of frozen shrimp onto each hook, the shell still on, the smell already on your fingers before you've cast a single time. He shows you how to swing the weight out past the pilings, not into them, and how to feel for the bottom by counting the seconds the line takes to go slack. You cast your first time, and the sinker lands 12 feet short of where he told you to aim, right against the third piling from the end, tangled instantly in the mussels growing on the wood. He doesn't get annoyed. He cuts the line, re-rigs it in 90 seconds without looking, and hands it back. You cast again. This time it clears the pilings. The bail clicks shut. Nothing happens for what feels like an hour, but is actually 11 minutes. Then the rod tip dips once, small, almost nothing. Your grandfather says, "Wait." It dips again, harder, and bends all the way to the cork handle. You don't know what to do with your hands. He puts his behind yours on the reel, and together you crank. Something alive is pulling against you from 30 feet down, and it does not want to come up. Your arms burn by the time the fish breaks the surface, an 11-inch whiting, silver and unremarkable to anyone else on the pier. To you, it is the single greatest thing that has ever happened. You hold it with both hands, the slime coating your fingers, and you don't wash them off for the rest of the day on purpose. Your grandfather takes a photo on a disposable camera he keeps in his tackle box for exactly this. You go home and you can't stop talking about the fish. Your parents have heard this story 4 times by dinner. They will hear it many more times before the summer is over because you've asked to go back to the pier every single day since, and they've started saying yes more often than not. Level 2, the regular. You're 12 now, and you go to the pier alone, or as alone as a 12-year-old is ever really allowed to go, which means your mother drops you off at 6 a.m. and picks you up at noon and trusts the pier regulars to keep half an eye on you. There were maybe 15 people who fish this pier every single morning, and by your 3rd week, you know all of their names before they know yours. There's a man named Ray who's fished the 3rd rail section for 11 years and won't move even if the fish are somewhere else, because he says the 3rd rail has never once let him down completely. There's a woman everyone calls Miss Dot who ties her own rigs and sells extras out of a tackle box for $1 each, and whose bait is somehow always fresher than the shop's. You learn the tide chart before you learn most of your times tables. You learn that the 2 hours around the tide change are worth more than the other 10 hours combined, and that fishing the slack water in the middle of a falling tide is mostly a waste of bait. You learn this the hard way first, 3 consecutive Saturdays with nothing but a few undersized croaker, before Ray finally tells you why without you asking. You start bringing your own bait now, not shrimp from the shop, but sand fleas you dig yourself at the tide line before the sun is even fully up, your hands cold and wet, kneeling in the surf looking for the telltale V-shape mark they leave when they burrow. You catch your first pompano this way, a fish that fights like something twice its size and tastes better than anything you've eaten in your life. Ray watches you land it and says, "Not bad, kid," which from Ray is closer to a standing ovation than you understand yet. You're not the best angler on the pier. You're not close, but you're there every single day it doesn't storm, and the regulars have started to notice that, and noticing that matters more on a pier than almost anything else. Level 3, the tournament rookie. You're 15, and there's a flyer taped to the bait shop window for the annual Pier Fishing Tournament. $10 entry, biggest fish in 3 categories takes the pot. You've never entered anything before. You empty your bike repair savings for the entry fee and show up at 5:30 a.m. on a Saturday with 62 other anglers lined up along the same 900 feet of railing you fished for 3 years. The pier feels different with this many people on it. Tighter, louder, more elbows. You've scouted your spot for a week, a stretch near the fourth piling where you've noticed bigger fish holding on an outgoing tide, but when you arrive, someone's already set up 2 coolers deep in exactly that spot. You have to adjust, take a stretch you don't know as well, closer to the T-head where the current runs faster and the footing is trickier. For the first 4 hours, you catch nothing worth weighing, just short whiting and a catfish you release without touching, because catfish spines have taught you a lesson you don't intend to repeat. Around 10:40 a.m., with the tournament ending at noon, your rod bends hard and stays bent, and you know immediately this is not a whiting. The fight lasts almost 6 minutes. Your arms shake. A stranger 3 rods down starts calling out advice you didn't ask for and mostly ignore, and another one nets it for you when it finally comes close enough, a 27-inch red drum, the biggest fish that has ever been on the end of your line. You weigh it at the scale table with your hands still trembling, 8.4 pounds. You don't win. A man named Curtis wins with a 34-inch drum caught 20 minutes before yours, but you place third, and third gets you $40 back on your $10 entry, and more than the money, it gets you something you can't put a number on. Curtis himself walks over afterward and tells you that was a good fight to watch. You go home and can't sleep from replaying it. Level 4, the gear-obsessed teenager. You're 17, and your grandfather's old Penn Squidder has been retired to a place of honor on your bedroom shelf. You've saved from a summer job bagging groceries to buy your own setup, a 12-foot heavy surf rod paired with a spinning reel rated for 300 yards of 30-pound braid, the kind of setup the serious pier anglers use, not the kind kids use. You research everything now. You know the difference between fluorocarbon and monofilament leader and why it matters in clear water. You know that circle hooks reduce gut hooking and increase your release survival rate, and you've started using them even though the older guys on the pier still swear by J-hooks, out of habit more than evidence. You build your own bottom rigs at your kitchen table at night, and your mother has stopped complaining about the fish smell that's permanently worked into the wood grain. You start targeting specific species instead of just fishing and seeing what bites. Sheep's head in the winter, holding tight against the pilings where their banded pattern make them almost invisible, requiring a bait presentation so precise you miss 9 bites for every one you actually hook, because they steal the bait off a hook with surgical patience. King mackerel in the fall, run out on a kayak-deployed bait because the big kings rarely come close enough to the pier to reach by casting alone, a technique that terrifies your mother the first time she learns about it. You catch your first king that October, 34 pounds, and it takes out almost 200 yards of line on its first run, the reel drag screaming in a way that draws every angler on the pier over to watch. You're no longer the kid who fishes here. You're becoming someone who other people watch fish here. And that shift happens so gradually, you don't notice it until Ray, of all people, asks you what rig you're using for the sheep's head this year, instead of telling you what to use. Level 5, the known name. You're 21, and people you've never met know your name before you introduce yourself because someone tagged a photo of your 41-pound cobia on the local fishing forum and it got shared into 3 different Facebook groups. You didn't ask for this. You caught a fish on a Tuesday afternoon in May, and by Thursday, strangers are messaging you asking what bait you used, what leader, what time the tide was moving. You answer most of them honestly because Ray answered you honestly a decade ago, and you understand now what that cost him in fish he might have kept to himself. You start helping people you don't know at the pier rail, showing a nervous father how to rig a rod for his daughter's first cast, walking a group of college kids through how to identify a sheep's head bite from a nibbling pinfish. You're not paid for any of this. You do it because someone did it for you first, and because there's a specific satisfaction in watching someone else's rod bend for the first time that doesn't fade no matter how many big fish you've caught yourself. You start keeping a log now, actual data, water temperature, tide stage, moon phase, wind direction, cross-referenced against what bit and when. 6 months of this, and you can predict, with real accuracy, which 3 days of a given week will fish best before you've even left your house. Other anglers start asking to see your log. You share it. Information wants to move on a pier the same way current does, and trying to dam it up just makes you unpopular for no real gain. Level 6, the tournament circuit angler. You're 25, and pier fishing tournaments have become a real part of your calendar. Not one $10 event a summer, but a circuit, 6 or 7 tournaments a year up and down 140 miles of coastline. Entry fees now running $75 to $150, prize pools sometimes reaching 5 figures for the biggest events. You've built relationships with other serious anglers on the circuit, some of them friends, some of them rivals, most of them both, depending on the week. You've learned things at this level that no pier regular ever taught you because the knowledge here is more guarded. Which specific jig heads outperform others in murky post-storm water? How to read a chart plotter's bottom contour to predict where bait schools stack up against a specific pier structure. You place in the money in 4 of 7 tournaments this year. Never first, twice second, twice third. Your biggest single payout is $2,200 for a 19-pound black drum that took 19 minutes to land while a judge stood over your shoulder with a clipboard verifying every second of the fight was legal. You're not making a living from this. You still work a regular job Monday through Friday, but fishing has stopped being purely a hobby and started being something closer to a second identity, one with its own reputation to protect, its own rivalries to manage, its own quiet code about what you do and don't say about where the fish are actually holding that week.
Level 7. The Guide. You're 29 and you've started taking people out for money, not on a boat, but pier-based guided trips, teaching visiting tourists and eager beginners how to fish this specific pier you grew up on. You charge $150 for a 4-hour session, bait and basic tackle included. Word spreads faster than you expect. Within a year, you're booked most weekends from March through October. This work is different from anything you've done before, because a guide's job isn't really to catch fish, it's to manage a stranger's expectations, their patience, their small failures in real time, while also actually catching fish often enough that they come back and tell their friends. You develop a teaching style that's mostly patience and specific correction, the same style Ray used on you without either of you ever calling it teaching. A retired school teacher books 4 sessions with you over one summer and lands her first fish over 20 pounds on the 4th trip, an amberjack that nearly pulls her off her feet, and she cries afterward, not from the exertion, from something else entirely. And you understand that feeling, because you felt a version of it at 10 years old holding an 11-inch whiting like it was a trophy. You also start seeing the pier differently now, as an economic ecosystem, not just a fishing spot. You know which bait shop owners are struggling, which pier managers are underfunding maintenance on the aging pilings, which parts of the tournament scene run honest and which run on favoritism. This knowledge doesn't make fishing feel less pure exactly, but it does make it feel more complicated, the way most things do once you understand how they actually work underneath. Level 8. The Record Chaser. You're 34, and there's one fish you've been chasing specifically for 3 years, a state pier-caught record for red drum that stood before you were born, 46 pounds 4 ounces, caught off a pier 80 miles north of yours by a man who's now in his 70s and still gets his photo hung in the bait shop every October. You've studied that old photo obsessively. You know the exact tide stage, the exact bait, the approximate location on that pier where he was standing. You've made the drive north 11 times over 3 seasons on the specific tide windows the research points to. Nothing close for 2.5 years. Then, on a Thursday morning in late September, wind out of the northeast at 12 knots, water temperature exactly where your log says it needs to be, your rod bends and doesn't stop bending. The fight takes 28 minutes, your forearms cramp twice, and you keep cranking through it. A crowd gathers, the way crowds always gather on a pier when a fight goes past 10 minutes. Strangers offering to net it, strangers filming it, strangers who will tell this story themselves for years, regardless of whether they ever learn your name. When it finally comes over the rail, it doesn't beat the old record. It comes close, agonizingly close. 44 pounds, 10 ounces, the second largest pier-caught red drum in the state's recorded history. You don't get the record, you get something almost as strange, a level of respect in the community that a record itself might not have earned you, because everyone who was there watched you fight for 28 minutes and refused to give an inch. And that story spreads further than a number in a record book ever could. Level 9. The Pier Legend. You're 44 now, and the kids who fish this pier don't know your first name. They know you as the guy who caught the 44-pounder, the one who still shows up before sunrise most days, even though you don't have to prove anything to anyone anymore. You've watched 3 generations of regulars come and go off this same 900 feet of wood and railing. Ray passed away 6 years ago, and you were one of 4 people asked to speak at his service, and you talked for 4 minutes about the third rail section and a tangled sinker and a man who never once made you feel stupid for not knowing something yet. You still fish that same rail sometimes, out of habit more than superstition, though you'd never admit which one it actually is. You've started doing what Ray did, without either of you calling it teaching, walking new kids through their first rig, answering the same questions you asked at 12, with the same patience you were shown then. A boy, maybe 11, asks you one Saturday morning why you still fish here when you could clearly afford a boat, a real one, offshore capable. You tell him the boat was never the point. The point was always this specific stretch of wood over this specific water, the tide moving the same way it's moved for decades, the same particular kind of waiting that a boat, for all its range, can't actually replicate. He doesn't fully understand yet. He will. And somewhere on this pier right now, a kid is holding a rod that isn't theirs, watching the tip for a movement they don't yet know how to read, standing next to someone patient enough to let them fail at the knot 4 times before finally tying it for them. Most of them will lose interest by August. A few won't. A few will start showing up before their parents are even awake, digging for sand fleas in cold surf at 5:30 in the morning, and they won't be able to explain it to anyone, because there isn't really a way to explain it that makes sense until you felt a rod bend all the way to the cork in your own hands. They'll learn the tide chart before their times tables, too. The pier will teach them, the same way it taught you. One small dip of the rod tip at a time.